After MacArthur Award-winning artist Aminah Brenda Lynn passed away in 2015 and left her estate to the Columbus Museum of Art, museum staff began surveying the house and its contents. We were awed by every corner of the home studio and its art, journals, library, archives, and furnishings. Exhibition co-curator Deidre Hamlar and I organized Raggin, the art of Aminah Brenda Lynn house and journals, to encourage visitors to share the same sense of awe about Aminah's life and work. Raggin is the result of 5 years of assessing and documenting the contents of the artist's home studio and understanding her mission. Aminah's work is founded on the Ghanaian concept of Sankofa, to retrieve the past in order to carry on in the present and move forward in the future. In her journals, Aminah articulated her goal. By the time I reached 9 years old, she wrote, I was deep into transforming and recording the culture of my people into works of art. The magnitude of research and study of Afro-Americans is what I have dedicated my life. My works are the missing pages of American history.
Raggin' On, the title of this exhibition, is an extension of Aminah's belief that her art merely initiates an experience for her audiences who encounter it, and that it rags on or continues to evolve in depth and meaning as viewers reflect, respond, and bring their own perspectives to it. Our title to the exhibition relates to the term Raggin' On, which is Aminah's word to describe her complex multimedia works of art that are layered with meaning and take years to complete. This introductory section invokes Aminah's spirit through her carved and painted front doors, hogmog sculpture, lovingly annotated books, embellished wooden boxes and furniture, and this grand chair that dominated her living room and which she constructed from scraps of wood and leather. For 40 years, from 1974 to 2015, the home studio at 791 Sunbury Road in the Shepherd neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio, was the fertile ground that supported and nurtured Aminah's boundless creative journey. The first section of the exhibition brings together Aminah's early work and later work based on her memories of growing up for the first 17 years of her life in Poindexter Village, one of the country's first federally funded apartment complexes for African Americans. With a start doing art as early as 3 years of age, by the time she was 10 years old, Aminah excelled in using graphite, pastels, and oils.
One of the most unexpected discoveries from Aminah's home studio was an assortment of more than 150 journals and sketchbooks that the artist maintained during her lifetime. On 5 monitors throughout the exhibition, excerpts from 11 of the journals are presented. In the beginning section, Aminah's journals from the 1963 March on Washington reveal both her hopes and fears regarding racism in America. The experience of leaving home for the first time to attend the march and her continued activism in the civil rights movement became an underlying and ever-present motivation for her work until the end of her life. The second journal on this monitor is Uncle Alvin's Stories. Written towards the end of her life, Aminah recounts growing up in Poindexter Village and the pivotal relationships she treasured with her parents and family elders and the impact these had on her art. In addition to the art and journals in this beginning section, photographs, letters, and documents mark Aminah's education in Columbus City schools and the Columbus Art School, now the Columbus College of Art and Design, the significance of her involvement in the civil rights movement, and the birth of her son, Sidney, in 1967. Aminah thought of the world as one huge art supply store. Her father taught her that she didn't need money to purchase art materials. Supplies were always available. He taught her to make dyes from fruits and vegetables and a sculpting material called hogmog, from mud, sticks, leaves, clay, and glue. Paper and rags that others discarded became the pulp of new handmade paper, and recycled boxes and bags the surface for imaginative drawings. The needle and button techniques Aminah learned from her mother became an integral part of much of the artist's work. Her sewing skills are apparent in button-beaded encrusted books and dolls and monumental tapestries she called Raggin-ons. Friends and acquaintances brought her ties and buttons, and she roamed antique shops and garage sales for found objects to use in her rag paintings and three-dimensional figures. Aminah purchased supplies as well, often ordering from catalogs she received in the mail or finding unusual papers and buttons when she traveled. While this materials matter section of the exhibition focuses on the many media and techniques she employed, more examples of her imaginative use of materials are evident throughout the exhibition.
Aminah was dedicated to telling the collective stories of Black people and making Black community life visible and relevant in the recording of American history. Street Cries presents emotional drawings depicting Aminah's own experience as a single mother forced to rely on welfare during the early 1970s. Long after she recovered financially, Aminah empathized with the plight of those who were homeless or struggling to survive the effects of poverty and illustrated her acknowledgement of destitute people in the U.S. and throughout her travels in other countries. Street Cries of a different sort are reflected in Aminah's lively scenes of the African American neighborhoods and commercial areas that surrounded her during the early to mid 1900s. Aminah based these drawings, paintings, and sculpture on stories her elders told, her own experiences, and historical research. For example, Bryce Florist was operated by Edna Bryce, a successful Black businesswoman and political activist, and Spencer's Market, operated by Richard Big Spence and his wife Juanita, was a popular destination for Juanita's famous chili sauce. Many of these businesses were forced to close or relocate when the construction of the interstate highway cut the neighborhood off from downtown Columbus in the 1960s. In addition to immortalizing the Black-owned Near East Side businesses that lined Mount Vernon Avenue and Long Street, Aminah honors also the individuals who lived, worked, and shopped there. The Sock Man, the Umbrella Man, the Chicken Foot Woman, the Brownie Skin Man, and other vendors who sold their wares on the street were the stars of her accordion book, A Street Called Home, and the subject for many 2- and 3-dimensional works. Another street cry that Aminah depicts is the cry for freedom and social equity. As a member of both the Congress of Racial Equality and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Aminah was astutely aware of the power of her art to provoke social commentary. As a student of the 1960s civil rights movement, Aminah created works such as this to enlighten audiences about important events in history that impact future actions toward racial and social justice.
Passionate about the importance of remembering the past, Aminah used the details of African American life in Columbus and the stories of the journeys of her African ancestors as templates for broader accounts of Black history and culture. In addition to being about her father, the monumental Raggin, Dad's Journey, is about Africans enduring enslavement, transport to America, emancipation, and the Great Migration. Art historian Ramona Austin observes in the Raggin catalog, as an African American woman born in the heyday of the Great Migration of Blacks from the South and privy to stories of those who were born into slavery or shortly thereafter, Aminah was witness to Africans becoming African Americans and the centrality of African American women to that process. More importantly, she translated that story into her art as an epic of memory and healing and the triumph of community overcoming affliction. Encapsulated within the story she told to honor the election of President Barack Obama, she honors those enslaved laborers who helped build our nation's capital. This scroll-like rag painting demonstrates the irony of a structure so symbolic of freedom and democracy that was built in part by those in bondage. In the same series, she depicts the Obama family in the Rose Garden at the White House. The election of an African-American president she viewed as a sign of freedom and hope for all Americans, but especially those of color. In a journal entry from 2006, Aminah described her view of what today we call systemic racism. Ancestral Voices leaves us with the question Aminah raised: how far have we come?
In emphasizing the importance of recording her thoughts and words, Aminah wrote, "It is impossible to separate the writing from the drawing, or the drawing from the writing." At the top of the stairs on the second floor of her home studio, Aminah converted a small bathroom to an intimate and private space, which we have reconstructed here in the exhibition. This is where she corresponded with friends and acquaintances, penned her memoirs, and authored her journals, all often illustrated with pen and ink drawings. To fulfill her goal of documenting African American stories, legends, and history, Aminah often combined annotations with art as typified in her series of unwritten love letters and manuscript pages. She also relished the stories that others wrote, such as those in 5 published books for children, including The Shaking Bag. This section also features one of many poems she wrote early in her career. In the Raggin section of the exhibition, 3 of the many themes that permeate decades of Aminah's work are presented. The first extols the power and strength of women, healers and growers, wives and mothers, business leaders and activists, writers and educators, and the many important roles they played. In the 1990s, Aminah began a series entitled A Clutch of Blossoms about such women she knew and admired, including her mother and her mother's friends. These women, she believed, were responsible for nurturing blossoms, which were their families and communities.
Another recurring theme in both her art and her journals resulted from Aminah's extended visits to Africa, South America, the Middle East, and Europe. These journeys reinforced her belief in the human similarities that connect people all over the world. Her journals reflect the enthusiasm and joy she experienced in traveling, and also an awareness of the poverty and injustice that often existed alongside the famous sites that attracted so many visitors. For Aminah, these journeys were part of her ongoing documentation of a global African presence. For example, she explored the centuries-old presence of Ethiopian Christians in the Old City of Jerusalem and depicted them in a number of paintings, drawings, and prints. Another theme permeating Aminah's work is the circus. In the late 1800s, Peter, Ephraim, Lewis, and William Sells established the Sells Brothers Circus in Columbus. It became one of the largest circuses in the country, and its winter quarters, known as Sellsville, was located in an unincorporated area on the west side of the Olentangy River. Importantly, the circus community was partially integrated with a school that served both Black and white students. Aminah was fascinated by Sellsville, and she created many drawings and paintings that celebrated it.
A life-size photograph of Aminah's living room in the last section of the exhibition invites visitors into the heart of her home studio. In this dense and lively space, she worked on her monumental Raggin tapestries surrounded by troves of books, research files, and works of art she traded with artist friends or received as gifts. Sharing the sofa to entertain occasional guests and cuddle beloved family pets, Aminah was known to work daily from 4:30 a.m. until midnight, sleep on the living room sofa, only to get up for an early start to begin her work again. All of Aminah's art was connected to a foundation in drawing. As she said, Drawing is to the artist what language is to the writer. Basic, not so much a tool or a technique as the natural means of remembering, visualizing, defining, and projecting. Of thinking, in short.
Many of those who visited with Aminah on the sofa in her home studio were interviewed for the Conversations video located in this section of the exhibition. Friends, relatives, and those from the arts community capture Aminah's spirit by recalling visits to her home, their favorite work of art by Aminah, and the often touching stories she shared. These examples of art by other artists surrounded Aminah in rooms throughout her house. They reflect the many relationships she maintained with a creative community of friends and family.
We hope you will visit the Raggin exhibition at the Columbus Museum of Art before it closes on October 3rd, 2021. We want you to sense Aminah's immortal spirit through her art, writing, collections, and voices of those that flowed through her home studio. And, as Aminah hoped, you will expand upon your experience by responding to it, thus ensuring that her work rags on and on.